usually have an annual physical in August, but this year I had a new doctor, Marion Weller, since my previous doctor retired. Dr. Weller is a young woman, about 30 years old, with red hair. I doubted that she would conduct an examination since physical contact is intimate and I may feel uncomfortable. Dr. Weller's nurse performed various preliminary procedures, including measuring my blood pressure, taking an ECG, and checking my memory by asking me to recall a book, an apple, and a table after a few minutes. I've always been worried about situations like this, but this time my anxiety was caused by the thought that I would be almost naked in the presence of a beautiful young woman. Despite my misgivings, I quickly realized that there was no need to worry, as I was too nervous to feel any desire. When we were done with this part, she kindly remarked, "I'm sure you feel relieved that everything is done." I replied gratefully, "Yes, thank you," and smiled back at her. When we finished our inspection, everything looked good, and the results of the blood tests were excellent. When I was about to leave, she suddenly asked, "Do you have 3 children?" I nodded, saying that I have 2 boys and a girl. Then she asked if I had adopted children or if they had been born thanks to IVF, to which I replied in the negative. Confused, I asked why she was asking. She blushed and explained that she was a beginner and had read all my notes before our meeting. I wondered what she had found there, but she quickly waved it off, saying it didn't matter. "You need to clarify this, doctor." "It's about my body," I insisted. "Mr. Miller, you have a disease. You have been infertile since birth," she said. The revelation hit me like a brick. "Has anyone informed you about this before?" "What is it?" I asked in disbelief. "No, please make copies of all my medical records," I asked. I was stunned by the news, feeling overwhelmed by the shock. "I'm sorry, but I should have kept quiet," she said. "No, not at all," I reassured her. Apparently, too many people were silent. About half an hour later, the papers were in my hands. As I waited, my mind wandered. I'm 48 years old, and I've been married to Melissa for 26 years. There are 3 children in our family: Brad, who is 24, Mary, who is 22, and William, who is 20. At least, that's what I thought. Brad is now married and expecting a child. Mary recently graduated from college, and William is in high school. I wondered who their biological father might be, but Dr. Weller's explanation did not convince me completely. All 3 children bore some resemblance to me. After receiving some of the notes, I studied them carefully in my office, considering various ways to confirm the information provided. In search of a second opinion, I contacted a college friend who worked as a urologist in New York. He called me back quickly. It was Mark Madden. "Hi Mark, I need your advice on an issue that requires strict confidentiality and can be discussed remotely. Send me your documents by email and I will review them this afternoon," I requested. "Okay, please send me an invoice for your services." "Thank you for your prompt help," I added. Mark called back at 3:30 p.m. with unexpected news. "Ted, I found out that you were born with a disease that led to infertility. I don't think you knew about it when you were born, and you were diagnosed. There was nothing you could do, but we have made progress over the last decade. Mark, could you send me a textbook on this topic?" I asked. "Of course, I'll email it to you within 10 minutes. "Thank you, Ted," Mark responded. "Do you have children?" he asked. "Yes, that's what I thought." "I see. Good luck," he concluded. I hung up and contacted the DNA lab. I arranged for them to send me several sets in one day, and they arrived without delay. At 5 o'clock, I put the kits in my briefcase and went home. My youngest son, William, is still in school and is going to leave next week. After thinking about it, I decided that it would be enough to test one of the children. When I got home, I found Will reading in the living room while Melissa was cooking. Melissa, who usually finishes work early, works as a real estate agent at my older brother Robert's agency. Thanks to her culinary skills, the air was filled with the aroma of fish. The 3 of us tried the crispy cod and salad, which were delicious. I think Mel caught my hesitation, although Will probably didn't notice. Mel, who is also 48 years old, has retained her student weight and appearance, with dark brown hair and eyes similar to mine. Tall and weighing like a young girl, Mel is very attractive. While Mel and I were cleaning, I picked up the glass that Will had used during dinner. After that, I lifted it up and cleaned the rim with a swab. Then I went to Will's room and picked up some hairs from his comb. I also took a swab from the neckline of the t-shirt in his laundry basket and from his sneakers. In addition, I took a swab from my cheek, sealed everything in envelopes, and put them in my briefcase. That night, after Will left, Mel asked, "What's going on with you, Ted? You look sluggish. Have you had a medical checkup? Has something happened?" "No, I'm healthy." "Most likely, I was worried about meeting a new doctor," I replied. "How is she?" Mel inquired. "Good and quite pretty," I answered. She giggled, her laughter was infectious. "He didn't get up, did he?" Mel questioned. "No, I was too worried about it," I responded. "Well, I'll see her next week." She was set up for contact, but I told her I didn't want to. She kindly agreed with my decision. The next day, I personally delivered the DNA samples to the lab for accelerated analysis, which I paid for. The lab promised that the results would be ready by Friday, in just 2 days. Then I went about my business at work, where I serve as a lawyer at an investment bank in Washington and lead a team of 6 lawyers. We are located next to the regulatory authorities, a strategically important place for our work. I have been working in this profession for 22 years, and I get a good salary from my knowledge. I have valuable stock options that can bring in a significant amount if they are sold. Despite the fact that I was a little distracted at work, I coped with my tasks. I rode my bike to and from the office, hoping that exercise would help me relax. When I got home at 6 o'clock, I found that Mel was not at home, but she left a note that there were sandwiches and salad in the fridge. She often attended various shows and bachelorette parties, so at first, I didn't pay attention to it, but now my trust in her has been undermined. I decided to track her location with my phone and discovered that she was not in a nightclub, as was supposed, but in a motel near the Fairfax line. At that time, I had dinner and chatted with Will about his college plans. Despite a successful summer when he worked in a bicycle repair shop and earned good money, he felt depressed after breaking up with his girlfriend Lisa. I decided to go to bed early, and Mel arrived at 11 p.m. and quickly joined me in bed without taking a shower. She seemed distant when I tried to approach her. I did it specifically to gauge her reaction because I suspected she was cheating, but I didn't know with whom. I didn't plan on trying to have an intimate relationship with her. I woke up early the next morning and rode my bike to work as usual. Arriving at the place, I took a shower and started my busy day. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I got a call from the DNA lab. I received the report by email, but when I talked to the specialist, he said a lot of things from which I only realized one thing, that my son Will may be my brother's son, but not mine. I was shocked. I have only one brother, Robert, who is 3 years older than me. Robert was always there for me when we were growing up. We were of the same height and average build. He played sports at school and even played basketball at university, although he was not an outstanding player. After graduating from high school, he went into the real estate business and achieved great success, eventually opening his own company. He married Glenda Wilson, his college sweetheart, and they had 3 children, all of whom graduated from college and are now working. 4 years ago, Melissa, who had previously worked as a teacher, joined his firm. Despite the fact that she earned well, she wanted a more fulfilling career. Since Will was already old enough to take care of himself after school, the news about DNA made me doubt everything. Since all 3 of my children celebrated their birthdays at the end of September, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was wrong. This year, the countdown to Christmas turned out to be different. Mel and I decided to give up birth control pills when we wanted to start a family. It took several months of trying before Brad showed up just before Christmas. During the Christmas holidays, Rob and his family took part in the usual big family celebration after Christmas that year, and for many years to come. Mel and her friend Linda Green went on a week-long meditation retreat. They left on Boxing Day, the second day of Christmas, and returned for the New Year, sometimes extending their stay for another week. The retreat took place at a center in the mountains of West Virginia. When Brad showed up, Mel didn't go the next year, but she went again the next time. Mary was born in September of the following year. While Mary was still breastfeeding, no seminars were held, but Mel and Linda resumed their attendance when their daughter turned 15 months old. In September of the following year, Will was born, and the field seminars continued for several more years. Eventually, Mel stopped attending seminars when she got a job with Rob. Linda, who had been Mel's best friend since college, also joined Rob's new company. This went on for some time. The following weekend, we drove Will back to college. I rented a minibus for the trip, and on Saturday, we enjoyed a pleasant 2-hour ride. We had lunch with Will, helped him move into his friend Mike Watson's apartment, and then said goodbye. Alone in the car with Mel, I was unusually silent. Eventually, Mel noticed this and asked what was the matter. Worried, she said, "You didn't even talk to me. What's on your mind?" "I have a lot on my mind, Mel." "I'm not going to talk about it right now," I replied. "Ted, you're not lying about the medical exam, are you?" she questioned. "Let's not dwell on it, Mel." "That's my suggestion at the moment," I said. We barely spoke for the rest of the hour-long ride. I left her at her destination and got back in the car, then headed to the nearest bar for a beer. As I sat in the bar, my anger grew, and it seemed to me that I could see everything through a red haze. I must have scared the young girl running the bar with my gaze. I threw a tenner on the counter and walked out. I had a group of friends with whom I played cards and tennis, but my best friend was Ned. I decided to visit his house, even though his wife, Sadie, and Mel never got along. Sadie and Mel weren't close, their children also went to college. When I arrived and rang the bell, Sadie opened the door, and Ned was standing next to her. It was immediately clear to them that I was not in the best shape. Ned has a cozy gym in the garage in the backyard. I told him that I needed to unwind, and we decided to do self-defense at the gym. I knew he had a punching bag because we trained together once a week. Without hesitation, we went to his backyard. I put on my gloves and started pouncing on the heavy bag with all my might, as if my life depended on it. Ned calmly watched me lose my temper, but then I started paying more attention to technique. I kept hitting and hitting until I finally fell down. Ned came over, helped me up, and led me into his house. I collapsed into a chair on his terrace, where Sadie kindly brought me some water. When I started to come to my senses, I burst into tears. Ned asked if anyone was dead or injured, but I assured him that they weren't. My emotions turned to anger, and I growled. Ned and Sandy wisely left me alone. 10 minutes later, Ned returned with a beer, and Sadie sat down next to me. I insisted that they keep quiet, and then I told them all the details. Both were stunned. Ned asked, "How did you find out about this? And shouldn't your parents have been aware?" I thought for a moment. When I was a child, my medical record clearly indicated this disease. "They should have known," I replied. Sadie asked, "What do you plan to do next?" "To be honest, I have no idea. But let's not get too hung up on it. Please don't hit him like you hit a punching bag. Prison is not the best place," Ned cautioned. "I'm not going to do that. I think it would be better if I went home now." "She will worry, but I want to avoid confrontation for now," I said. I returned to my house, where Mel was waiting for me at the door. "Where have you been?" "I was so worried," she said. I explained that I had stopped by for a beer and to meet Ned, and then went to his house to help with carrying bags. "I'm sorry. I should have called," I confessed. After taking a shower, we had dinner together. On Sunday, we had a picnic in a nearby park and went roller skating, but we didn't make love that night. The next morning, Mel looked disappointed and confused as I got up early and left for work without touching her. I had an appointment with a lawyer in a nearby office building, and I also went to the bank. In addition, I went to my company's HR department to change the information about the direct deposit and beneficiaries of my retirement account, which turned out to be a difficult task. Molly Stanton's lawyer informed me about the divorce case in our state, and I told her that my wife, Mel, and my brother were unfaithful to me. This information could potentially be useful. I asked the lawyer to file for divorce on alternative grounds, but told her not to give it to Mel without my consent. Later that day, I secretly installed a tracking program on Mel's mobile phone, as she was connected to my data plan, which allowed me to track her messages and calls. I strategically placed 3 small dictaphones around the house, one in the kitchen, one in the bedroom, and one in the living room. I also discreetly put one in her car to distract attention. I asked Mel to organize a party at my house on Friday night with Rob and Glenda. On Monday and Tuesday, I stayed late at work, claiming that I had urgent business. When Wednesday came, I tried to get home as soon as possible. Despite the happy appearance and pleasant dinner together, there was a noticeable lack of intimacy between us. It was obvious that Mel was disappointed. After that, I downloaded all the recordings from the recorder and examined her phone. When Mel went to bed, I listened to her. There were only a few entries. The house was empty during the day. Mel did not deal with mental anguish. She made one call to Rob's cell phone and another to my mom. My mother was widowed 5 years ago. She was 78 years old and lived only 30 minutes away from my childhood home. The bell rang, and next, I heard Mel's voice. He seemed to be acting irrationally after the medical examination. He became not himself. I do not know what is going on. Then, she called Rob. "Hi Rob, this is Mel." "No, we can't meet this week. You guys are coming on Friday, and Ted's behavior is disturbing. I'm not sure what's going on. I don't think he'll find out anything. We have to be careful. I think he received some disturbing news after the medical examination. Okay, take care of yourself. Bye." This conversation became the last chapter of my marriage. Although we are still together, it became clear to me that maybe initially they thought they were helping me, but regardless of their intentions, I am determined to make them pay for their actions. Rob and Glenda showed up at 6:30 p.m. on Friday, and Mel and I cooked dinner, fried burgers, French fries, and salad. While we were cooking, I tried to avoid talking to Mel. She seemed to notice my behavior but chose not to comment on it. When the doorbell rang unexpectedly, she looked at me and said, "I hope you're not going to be in a bad mood all evening, Ted." Without saying a word, I went to open the door. Rob and Glenda were standing on the other side. Glenda hugged me warmly, and Rob tried to do the same, but I quickly turned away. I poured them drinks, beer for Rob and white wine for Glenda, and we all gathered on the terrace. Taking a deep breath, I finally spoke up. "Mel, I'm divorcing you. You will receive a divorce petition on Monday. Rob, I'm suing you for alimony for all the years that I've raised and financially supported your children." Mel started crying, and Rob got up angrily and came over to me. "You're an idiot. I'm going to hit you now," he threatened. Glenda watched in shock as Rob tried to hit me while I was sitting on the porch. I managed to dodge his punch, causing my chair to tip over. Rob was laughing at me. "Are you angry? You're a hypocritical jerk. Let's deal with this right now." Growling, he rushed at me, waving his fists. I quickly dodged his attack and landed a powerful punch in the stomach. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't match my strength. When he was writhing in pain, I didn't hesitate to hit him again. Mel's screams went unnoticed, and I tirelessly punched Rob until he collapsed on my shoulder. As a final act of retaliation, I kneed him in the groin and threw him onto the terrace. Glenda, who was watching the scene, stood up and saw Mel rush to Rob's aid. He was conscious and moaning. Mel looked at me accusingly. "You had no reason to hurt Rob, none at all. You're just a beast. You could have taken his life," she continued to cry. "And you're not out of danger either. You're a lying person," I growled at her. Mel paled at my warning. She carefully moved away from Rob. I growled at her, "Take this worthless man and take him away from my entourage. You only have a minute before I'm done with him forever." Mel struggled to lift Rob, barely managing his limp body. Turning to Glenda, she asked for help, but Glenda didn't react and refused to help. Mel managed to move Rob to the couch in the yard and then carried him to the kitchen. I turned to Glenda and asked, "Did you know too?" She shook her head, denying her involvement. Over the years, I've had suspicions about Rob, but never about Mel. I think they're still together. Maybe she has other men, but I can't say for sure. When I heard the garage door open, I went inside, looked out the front door, and saw Mel putting Rob in the passenger seat of his SUV and driving away. Then, Glenda came in, a pleasant-looking blonde, 46 years old, dressed for a dinner party but with smudged makeup. I offered her more wine, but she refused, asking for an explanation. That's what I did. She was sitting at the kitchen table. "Glenda," I said, "Rob always went on winter skiing trips after Christmas workshops. I don't like skiing and stayed at home with Mark. Mark is her son." I wondered where they actually went, but Glenda didn't seem interested. "I'm sorry, Glenda. I thought you knew everything. Are you really getting divorced?" I asked. "Yes, undoubtedly," she replied. I offered her a guest room for the night, and she agreed. After that, we delved into conversations about the past, discussing possible meetings between Rob and Mel. In the present, I shared with her a recording of Mel's phone conversation with Rob, thereby confirming that their romance was continuing. At 10 p.m., we sat down at the table to eat hamburgers, discussing practical issues such as future living conditions. I mentioned that I was standing in line for an apartment near my place of work, assuming that Mel and I would share the costs, including the proceeds from the house. In the meantime, I planned to stay in my current home. Glenda decided to go upstairs and get ready for bed. Curious, I followed her to inspect the guest room. She had everything ready, and I handed her a towel and a toothbrush. When she left, she confessed, "I've always liked you more than Mel." She seemed to think that I was on a different level than Mel. I waved goodbye to her as I closed the door. The next morning, I got up early and saw that the police had not yet appeared. It seems that both Rob and Mel did not want to attract too much attention to themselves. I asked Glenda about her plans, to which she replied that she intended to live with her mother until Rob left their house. I gave her the email address of my lawyer and advised her to contact him for further recommendations. Noticing that her car was still parked on the street, I suggested that she go with me to get her things, to which she agreed. Taking a pistol from the gun safe, I followed her car as we drove to their house. We found out that Mel's car wasn't there. Glenda and I entered the house, but it was empty. Thinking about the damage I had done to this jerk, I couldn't help but imagine him in pain in a gloomy hospital from a fatal infection or dehydration. "I wonder where they are," Glenda asked, and I suggested tracing their location. When I opened the phone locator, I found that Mel's phone was now in the Cumbria hospital. After calling the hospital and inquiring about Rob's whereabouts, I found out that he had already been admitted. I broke the news to Glenda, asking her to stay at home and change the locks. Then, I went to Home Depot to buy new hardware, some for her and some for myself. In the morning, after installing new locks, I handed Glenda the keys and left. But feeling compassion for her, I expressed a desire to return. She agreed, mentioning that she would cook for us. After finishing installing new locks in the house and making additional keys for Glenda and me, I went home to find her there at 4 o'clock. As soon as I entered the house, my mobile phone rang. Detective William James was on the line and wanted to talk to me. I informed him of my location at 204 Western Street and mentioned that Mrs. Glenda Miller was also there. He asked if she was the second witness or the victim's wife, to which I explained that she was not the victim and confirmed that she was the wife. Detective James agreed to come, promising to arrive in 15 minutes. He was a short and stocky man dressed in a formal suit and luxurious loafers. Glenda invited him into the house, where he introduced himself and asked if it was comfortable for the two of us. She calmly replied, "No, it's our spouses who betray us, not us." She looked at me and added, "For now." James's gaze darted between Glenda and me, his expression unreadable. "Maybe you'll get lucky, baby," I replied. "Maybe." I glanced at Glenda, who met my gaze without flinching. I couldn't help but feel that this was not the most effective way to conduct a police interrogation. James said he'd like to talk to Mrs. Miller first. Glenda took him to the backyard, where he turned on the recorder on his phone. They talked for almost 20 minutes, after which he asked to talk to me. Glenda whispered as she passed me, "I'm serious." Her seemingly sincere offer looked like a deceptive distraction. Despite my admiration for her and her looks, I was not one to be fooled. Despite this, the detective insisted that he was gathering information and urged me to tell him what happened. I started with the shocking news that Rob is actually the father of my children, which was a recent discovery for me. I explained in detail about our dinner on Friday and Rob's unexpected reaction, as well as our subsequent disagreements. I told him all the details I could remember. After listening to my story, the detective asked, "How do you know all this?" I prefer not to discuss it. I'll just say that no one informed me. Everything happened unexpectedly, I replied. "Good, Mr. Miller. Your testimony fits well with what the wife said. I haven't questioned your brother yet. After talking to your wife, it turned out that he provoked a quarrel, and you reacted. Besides, he's not in the best condition right now, and he'll have to be watched for a day or two." His eyes were fixed on me. He was serious. A knee to the groin is not a laughing matter. It can really lead to trouble. But then he suddenly turned away and smiled. "What will happen next?" I asked. "I will document this and send it to the Commonwealth prosecutor for a decision. At the same time, I will talk to your brother." Detective James stood up, and I led him into the house, where Glenda met us at the front door. As he turned to leave, he wished us a good evening. After that, he went to his car. Glenda closed the door and positioned herself right in front of me. She tilted her head slightly to the side and raised it, saying that a hearty salad was waiting in the refrigerator for dinner. She assured me that there was no hurry, and it was clear from her tone what she wanted. For me, I was amazed at how women can communicate their desires so easily without hesitation. I kissed her, accepting the unspoken invitation without hesitation. She hugged me passionately, dragging me to the sofa with her and showering me with kisses. She pulled me closer, and her fury spurred my response. While we were undressing, I stood over her and watched her take off her dress. It was obvious that she had planned this seduction, and it was undeniably effective. It was not a moment of love, but pure passion. I brought her to several climaxes before finally breaking free, unable to hold back any longer. Here's the corrected version of the text. Taking my hand, she led me to the kitchen where we had dinner, and then we went upstairs. She mentioned that she saw our actions as a form of recovery, to which I replied that I didn't mind. We continued to make love, took a shower, and then made love again. We experimented with different ways to please each other and reached a climax several times. Eventually, our middle-aged bodies wanted to rest, and we finally succumbed to sleep. I was the first to wake up that morning. I was taking a shower in the bedroom when she suddenly came into my room, causing another flash. We soaked each other, washed, and dried everything together. After that, we brought each other to a climax and then took a shower again. As we sat down to breakfast, we both pondered the whereabouts of our spouses. Although neither of us was religious, it was Sunday. I tracked down Mel's phone and found that she was at my mother's house. This realization prompted me to talk to my mother, as I suspected that she might have played a role in my becoming a cuckold. After discussing this with Glenda, she expressed uncertainty and suggested that the details of how it happened might not be important. But I felt it was very important to find out if my mother was involved. Besides, I needed to talk to Mel. Maybe she came home but couldn't get into the house. She showed no interest in meeting or talking to me. Perhaps they are solving some problems. I'm going there. Do you want to come with me? I asked Glenda. I always want this. I have a wild nature, she giggled. So, will you join me to talk to Mom? Yes, why not? Let's give them a hint of what we've done. In fact, what's the point of making love and revenge if the cheaters don't know about it? We both laughed. When we arrived at my mother Shirley Miller's house, we noticed Mel's car parked outside. When Glenda and I went out on the porch, Mom opened the door and immediately told me to leave, accusing me of offending Rob. I defended my actions by explaining that Rob tried to hit me first. Having decided to sort out the situation, I warned my mother that if I left now, I would not come back. Reluctantly, she let me enter the house, and Glenda followed me. Mel was sitting quietly in the kitchen, and as soon as she saw us, I felt like she knew everything. She exclaimed, "You didn't waste any time, did you?" Glenda replied, "Why should I wait? I know your lover won't be able to satisfy me anymore, but your husband will definitely be able to." Mel jumped up, but I pulled her away. My mom yelled for us to stop. She turned to me and said, "Ted, you probably ruined everything when you slept with Glenda." I replied, "No, I'm free now, and so is she." That's always been the case with Mel and Rob. Glenda and I have a lot to catch up on, and we started from the beginning. Mel insisted that we should listen to him and my mother to shed some light on what was going on. I looked to my wife, then to my mother, before finally saying, "I'm listening." Shirley met Mel's gaze as she continued to confess, "We both wanted children, but when we started trying, your mother declared that you were infertile. You didn't even know about it." Shirley intervened, but I had a solution. Rob could have impregnated Mel that way, and you wouldn't have found out about it. I replied, "You decided this without consulting me." She continued, "Your father tried to bring this issue up for discussion but was rejected by 3 votes to 1. We considered various options, including medical ones, but they all turned out to be too expensive and time-consuming. After all, you should have realized that you were raising Rob's children." Mel reluctantly admitted, "We decided to do it the natural way." I replied, "You lied. You secretly made love for a week, and at some point, even 2 weeks. And that was good for you, wasn't it?" Mel lowered her eyes and confessed, "It was awkward at first, but then we had a great time, and everything got better. I was looking forward to spending time with Rob. He's a good person." "Is it true?" Glenda asked angrily. "What about me, trash?" She looked at Mel. "You lied and laughed at me." Shirley chimed in, "We thought you wouldn't agree." Glenda's frown deepened. "You were right. I would not have agreed then, and I still do not agree. You caused my divorce, and I'm sure Ted thinks so too. No one needed to get divorced. None of you knew anything, and you've both been happy so far. How did you know, Ted?" During the examination at medical, the doctor informed me that I have been infertile since birth. I decided to do a DNA test on William. Mel lowered her eyes. "Now you know the truth. We can get through this together because I know that you love our children." I said, "I cannot ignore the fact that you have been unfaithful throughout our relationship, even after the birth of 3 children and even when you started working for his company. I bet you didn't stop." Glenda snorted, "Well, how many times have you and Rob slept together in the last year?" Shirley looked at Mel in disbelief. "Mel, please tell me that's not true." "Mel, we fell in love with each other. We had a connection both in and out of bed. That's why we kept seeing each other," I added. "Yes, like last week at the Shady Pines Motel," Mel looked shocked. "Have you hired a private investigator?" I chuckled. "I just used the locator on your phone," Mel comforted me. "We can stop. We will stop. I only need you," Glenda added. "I want him too." "You can leave with your big love." Shirley, who was standing, suddenly sat down on a kitchen chair, looking unwell. Worried, I asked, "Mom, are you all right?" She began to cry, wailing, "What have I done?" Glenda added, "Secrets and lies only lead to more secrets and lies." "You should have told Ted from the beginning," Mel suggested. "If Shirley hadn't done what she did, our kids wouldn't be here." maybe they wouldn't be so bad. You, Rob, and my mother conspired against me, resulting in my life being built on deception and betrayal. After reflecting on my past, I realized that everything I knew was a facade, and my entire existence was a lie. Overwhelmed with grief, I sat down, and Mel came over to me. Unable to stand her presence, I pushed her away and burst into tears. "Don't ever come near me again, Mel." Glenda hugged me tightly, and the two of us shed tears. Eventually, I got to my feet, and we walked away. When we returned to Glenda's house, we were gloomy. I helped her with the garden and mowed the lawn, after which we sat down to lunch. A conversation ensued, and I couldn't resist asking Glenda, "Are you absolutely sure about the divorce? You and Rob have been together for so long." Glenda agreed. "I remember our previous conversation about how you felt like your life was being taken away. I feel the same way. I'll go with you to a meeting with a lawyer tomorrow. I don't see a way to come to terms with the situation because the anger has been building up for a long time. I have to think about the welfare of the children. Are you thinking about how to explain the situation to them in case of divorce?" As a result, I decided to contact them by phone or letter and ask for a conversation. After lunch, I sat down to write a letter to my 3 children. In the letter, I tried to express that no matter what, they will always be my children, that they will always be the ones I cherished and cherished. Then, I sent them all an email asking them to call me. About an hour later, my cell phone rang, and it was my daughter, Mary. "Dad, are you all right? How are you feeling? It's very difficult for me to get over it. You should know that I love you. You are my dad forever. I'm trying to understand the situation with your mom and grandma. How could they do this to you? Grandma thought she was helping, but I didn't realize that their actions would have long-term consequences. I will never be able to forgive Mom for being involved in this. Further actions depend on me, and I do not know what to do next. I hope we can find a solution that is at least somewhat friendly. It's not going to be easy, but I just wanted to talk to you. I love you." "I love you too." We ended the conversation and hung up. 2 minutes after Brad's call, William got in touch. He looked more hesitant than the others. He confessed, "When I was home alone while everyone was at school, I noticed something strange about my mom. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I'm sorry, Dad. It's all in the past. Don't dwell on it. You find yourself in a difficult situation, not understanding the full depth of what is happening." Our conversation ended shortly after it started. It was difficult for Will to express his thoughts. He was always very attached to his mother. That's what I thought. I doubted he really understood much about her and Rob. Glenda was in the kitchen flipping through an old photo album. I joined her, and we came across photos of both our families in their youth. Soon, tears began to flow down our faces. Glenda hesitated, suggesting that maybe diving into the past wasn't such a good idea. I hugged her tightly and gave her a friendly kiss while we reminisced about the past. Eventually, we went to bed and fell asleep together without any intimacy. The next morning, we visited a lawyer named Millie Stanton, who seemed hesitant to talk to both of us at the same time. Despite her initial discomfort, we insisted on discussing our problems together. Millie was a middle-aged woman with a 50s-style hairstyle who exuded calmness despite her gray hair. Despite the hairstyle, I liked her. She talked about the rules of divorce in our state, mentioning that adultery used to be a common reason for divorce, but now it happens less often. She noted that our circumstances are unique, and we have developed a plan according to which we will both file for divorce, and I will demand alimony from Rob. Millie didn't want to involve Glenda in this process because of their financial ties to Rob. She offered to either file the documents immediately or wait until the end of maternity leave and sue Rob. I asked Millie to file a lawsuit at work and at the same time as Rob. It was supposed to happen on Wednesday. I took Glenda to her bank to split up their property. After spending some time at the bank, we had a late lunch at the Italian restaurant Bon. We returned to Glenda's house around 4 o'clock. I decided to go back to my house, and Glenda came with me. No one touched the new locks. We entered the house, and she looked around, recognizing the familiar surroundings she had known for many years. When I turned to face her, she was standing next to me with a determined look. "I want you to make love to me on your bed right now," she said urgently. Unable to resist her sincere plea, I picked her up in my arms and carried her upstairs to the spacious bedroom. She laughed playfully and said, "You are so brave and strong. Rob definitely couldn't do that." We both got undressed, mirroring each other naked, and then fell onto the bed. Time seemed to slow down when we started making love. At first, it seemed strange to be in intimate proximity with another woman on this bed, but soon I was enjoying the moment. She was wild and passionate, taking whatever she wanted. After we lay down, it was some time before she spoke. "It was amazing," she said. "Taking that bitch's husband on her own bed couldn't be better." I grinned and replied, "You're so vindictive." "Yes," she agreed, and everything turned out in my favor. "Well, mostly mine," I added. "But you liked it too." "Of course I liked it," she said. This act of revenge was, in itself, the culmination. "Yes," she laughed, "we spent the whole night making love until we finally stopped. The next morning, before we went to work, we shared our affection. After taking a shower, we shed a few tears, then packed up and went to work." Glenda decided to wear one of Mel's work outfits, which I expected was a form of revenge. The outfit was too tight for her. While I was at work, Mel called me and said she needed to go home to pack her things. "I can meet you at the house at 6. "Has Rob been discharged from the hospital yet?" "No, he's going to have surgery." "You did a great job with him. Where are you staying?" "I'm staying at your mother's house, in your old room." "What an irony." "And where are you staying with this idiot?" "We're at her place, then at mine." "And what happens when Rob is discharged?" "It's not my concern." "Have you heard anything about the children?" "No." "What did you do?" "I sent them an email detailing the events and spoke to them on the phone." "They're going to hate me, Ted." "None of them contacted me." "You know what you've done." She shouted, "Go to hell," and I hung up. Mel arrived at the house at 6, right on schedule. It was an unexpected turn of events. When she got out of the car, I opened the door for her. She went upstairs, and then there was a scream. She was lying on my bed. I can smell her. "I can't believe you could do something like that," I went up to her and said. She expressed a desire to avenge the fact that her husband was taken away from her. Mel's anger was palpable as she packed her things, including a bag of toiletries. As she was about to leave, she didn't notice that the suit Glenda was wearing was missing. She turned to me and asked if there was a possibility of reconciliation. I answered firmly, "No, Mel." I meant every word I said. "It's over between us." She looked depressed but not surprised. "Initially, I hoped that I would have a happy family like any wife," she began. "It seemed like the perfect solution, but things turned out for the worse. I deeply regret this. I can't forgive you. No number of apologies can erase the fact that you had children with another person and cheated on me over the years. Your apologies are insufficient, and I doubt their sincerity." She got into the car and drove away. The next day, she went to work. After lunch, my mother called. "Ted, why are you rushing through the paperwork? What's the matter?" "What is it?" she asked. "If you calm down, maybe things will get better." "It's not like that, Mom," I replied. "She's been having an affair with Rob for years." "Don't, Ted," Mom said sternly, "and don't forget who was the cause of all this." "I remember," I said. "Everything was fine until last week. Goodbye. I still don't know what to do with her. After all, she's the one to blame for all this chaos. I'm trying to protect us from unwanted sympathy from others." Rob was discharged from the hospital on Friday, unable to return to his own home as Glenda would most likely have harmed him with her firearm. He took refuge in our mother's house. Mel lived there too. I wasn't bothered by their presence, even if they were using my old room or his. But if my mother lets them stay, then she's not my mother anymore. Glenda and I conferred and decided to sort out the situation together. Since I still had the key to the house, we waited until 2 o'clock in the morning before acting. I drove us to the house and used the key to quietly open the back door. As a precaution, I brought a pistol with me in case of possible danger. Glenda stayed downstairs, and I carefully went upstairs and looked into my old room. My suspicions were confirmed when I saw them both, but not in Rob's room as expected, but in mine. The two of them on a double bed. I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight to take some pictures. The room was filled with screams, mostly of naked Rob. Also undressed, he had a large bandage wrapped around his lower ribs, preventing him from moving. Mel calmly covered herself with a blanket. When my mom ran out into the hallway and saw me, she warned, "Ted, don't jump to conclusions." I replied, "I don't need to, you support their actions which continue to this day." I went downstairs and found Glenda waiting for me. She said, "They must have been together." Mom and Mel immediately came running, and Mel was in a bathrobe. The bad boy Rob was nowhere to be found. Mom sighed, "They're adults, what can I do? Kick them out into the street." I noticed my old bed and realized that Rob intended to sleep with it wherever I was. Mel replied, "He wouldn't have made it, you saw him." I grinned at him, "You really tried, didn't you? And now what?" "What? I don't have a chance with you." "Is this true?" "Burn in hell." Turning to my mother, I said, "You're done. I may still be your son, but no more. It belongs to you now, not to me." Glenda and I left, returning to her house. We went to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. Glenda and I stayed close to each other while our divorces went through the courts. Mel and I sold our house and split the proceeds. She did not receive any alimony or other support from me. The judge did not approve of her actions. My children have adapted well to the current situation. The older two communicated with Mel only through a Christmas card and blocked her calls. We'll talk to her, but not very friendly. During the summer holidays, he decided to stay with me. He didn't talk to Rob. Mel had met him for lunch several times, but Rob wasn't with her. Will avoided talking to him as a result of the divorce. Glenda received most of the property, including the house and a significant part of Rob's business. Rob, in turn, moved into a 2-room apartment with Mel a week after the divorce. Glenda and I talked and realized that although our intimate sympathy is still strong, in other aspects of the relationship we are not quite compatible. As a result, I decided to move out. Neither of us felt particularly sad about the situation. From the very beginning, it became clear that our relationship was short-lived due to problems in the past. Despite this, she asked me to continue making love to her from time to time while she remained single, and I agreed. We had a strong physical bond, and the closeness was pleasant. After a successful operation, I stopped being infertile at the age of 49. Overall, I think there was a definite positive in this situation. One evening at the gym where Ned and I were practicing self-defense, I witnessed a woman forcefully kicking a heavy bag. She radiated strength and confidence. When she finished her workout, she looked in my direction and jokingly asked, "Are you scared?" I replied with a smile and raised my hands in surrender. She giggled and remarked, "I'm watching you. Aren't you afraid of me?" I replied, "No, I'm Hilda Marks, and you must be Ted Miller. I'm going to pop in the shower and have a coffee." She pointed to the store across the street. "I'll meet you there in 10 minutes, maybe 15. After all, I'm a woman." Our conversation was pleasant. She said that she had recently arrived in the area. She was 36 years old, had a school-age son, but no husband. She left him on the West Coast. We talked for almost 2 hours, delving into all aspects of my life, including my medical history. By the time the store closed, she knew everything about me. I was fascinated by her interest. At that time, I lived in a bungalow next to the gym with 2 bedrooms. It took 2 weeks before she finally visited my bed and stayed the night. She was as wild in bed as she was in the gym, but I was determined to dominate. Her desire to be conquered turned me on incredibly. Hilda's son Donald was 16 years old, and he was in the penultimate year of school. We became close because of our shared love of baseball as we both practiced the sport. Over time, I started helping the school team, which further strengthened our bond. 6 months later, Hilda and I tied the knot because she was expecting a baby. The decision was made suddenly. Donald and Hilda moved into a house that I bought next to my own, where Donald had his own room and a place in the basement for sports equipment. This allowed Hilda to continue playing sports. Thomas Timothy Miller was born soon after, and to me, he was nothing short of a miracle. Mel and Rob quickly became a thing of the past as she changed agencies and started dating a young guy who was clearly involved in illegal activities. As a result, after a while, Mel was detained by the police with a large number of prohibited substances. Glenda married her college sweetheart, James Wilder, and Hilda and I had a little chat with them. James turned out to be a nice guy, and Glenda, as always, looked great. I suppose she still has a certain appeal. In bed, James and I discussed this issue once, and this moment brought us closer together. I still haven't completely forgiven my mother, but I visited her when Thomas was born. She was overjoyed. Hilda made sure that my mother visited him regularly, showing him more sympathy than I did. My mother passed away in June of this year. The memorial service was held calmly despite the difficult family life. Rob said goodbye to her, but I couldn't bring myself to do the same. After that, he kept his distance from me.